Welcome to week 9 of the Nonfiction Writing Workshop. This week we're going to talk a little bit more about the final project and some of the readings, and you can see how they might be helpful to you. Just to remind you once again about the final project. It's due on Saturday, March 7th at midnight. We're looking for an extended story, about 2,000 to 4,000 words, so you'll have time to tell a good story. You select the style and the topic. So you can write about a personal experience if you want, something you've observed, or something you're interested in, something that's going on at the university or in sports or whatever. The target readership for this, as I've pointed out to you before, is readership like that of the New Yorker, Vanity Fair, Sports Illustrated, a Sunday newspaper supplement, or Medium, which is a service on the internet which includes a lot of stories. So that would be another place this could turn up. So what are we looking for in this story? We're looking for these elements that we've been talking about all throughout this term. We're looking for a narrative, nonfiction story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. I'll talk about that in a minute. And you should employ all the things that we've learned, including scenes and dialogue and description, and try to tell the best story you can using these techniques. So what about this beginning, a middle, and an end? You've heard about that a lot. It's pretty obvious, I think. But let me talk about it for just a moment as a way to think about what you're doing. If you already started your story, you can step back and see whether you're going in the right direction or not. A beginning is something that engages the reader. The idea is to capture their attention and motivate them to read what is going to follow. You can start with a scene, an anecdote, an engaging fact, an engaging quote, or a tantalizing summary. An anecdote really is just a little story with all the elements in it. A scene doesn't necessarily have a story to it. Something happens in a scene. But in an anecdote, it also has its beginning, middle, and an end. It's like a joke. It's another way to think about it. So it has a punchline at the end of it. So that's the beginning. The next thing, of course, is the middle. I think you know what that is. That's essentially what happens in your story. We want you to tell it in a narrative style, using scenes, again, dialogue, description, and exposition. And it's often arranged chronologically. This happened, this happened, this happened, and this happened. Although the example we're going to show you in a minute rearranges the chronology a little bit to make the story interesting. And for the end of the story, of course, you're looking for a resolution of the narrative. In other words, the story ends. And the ending itself could be the meaning. The end could be a personal writer's summation, your summation of what the story you've just told means. Or it could be a character. A character in the story says something, and that happens, that sort of sums up the essence of the story and its weight. It also could be a scene. In the example we're going to look at, you're going to see how a scene ends up being a really powerful ending for a story. So to get an example for this, what we're going to do is look at a story that was in the New York Times about Kobe Bryant. About a week after Kobe died in this crash, the people in the sports section went back and recreated kind of the final day or two of his life. And this is what we're going to show you in this story. You're going to see how it's done. And what I've done is I've given you the story to read. Take some time with that and see what you think of it. And then I've given you what I call a deconstruction of it. I went through the story sort of paragraph by paragraph and tried to explain what the writers were trying to do in each one of these areas. The beginning is actually an example of time shifting. In other words, a scene is picked out where they're in the airport about to depart. Then there's a quick transition that explains what this is going to be about. Then it goes back to a day or so before and follows a series of events chronologically of what occurred before this accident occurred. And you see how various techniques were used. Scenes, quotes from people, little bitty stories, an anecdote, for example, that tells a story. And then at the end, the summation is really done dramatically, and it's done implicitly. In other words, they don't say this is the end of the story. but they show you something, and you witness a scene that really sums up all of the feeling that this has generated. So it's a very interesting story, I think, and I think a good example of narrative nonfiction done against deadline. In other words, for a newspaper. It was done very quickly in 1 week, and it shows what can be done. So these are the things to think about when you're putting together your final project. I'm looking forward to reading yours, so it's due Saturday night at midnight, and I'll turn those around as quickly as possible and have them to you for the final week, and then we can talk about them and see each other's, and if you want to do a rewrite on that, you can, of course. So that's the story for week 9, and good luck with your final project.